Hello, I'm Eleanor Gayatan with the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. I'm the Director of Public Policy, and I'm joined by three colleagues who are extraordinary advocates who are in our field, and you will learn more about, here's our title, Congressional Outreach, Strategies and Tips for Effective Legislative Advocacy. I'm joined today by Samantha Cadet, who's the Director of Federal Affairs at RAIN, the Rape, Assault, Incest National Network, and by Denise Edwards, who's the Director of Government Affairs at the National Children's Alliance. Also, Jan Edwards joins us from Florida. She is the founder and president of Paving the Way. Jan does advocacy in Washington, D.C. too. So our focus is going to be Congress. Let's start with the basics. Why do we do this? Why do we go out of our way to make connections with members of Congress and their staffs? I'm going to start with Samantha.
Yes, hello. Well, thank you so much for having me. So I know for me, I'm so thankful for advocates and lobbyists because they are so essential in terms of educating legislators. I can't count how many times there was a bill and a legislator meant to do well, but the bill is actually going to hurt survivors. So we had to go in and explain it to them. Of course, they're very amenable to it and to the changes, but that's our main role in terms of making sure great bills come out and also telling legislators what's needed for survivors. So,
Denise?
Well, similar to Samantha, I want to say thank you. This is such a wonderful conference, and thank you for letting me join with you today. I love this question because I think it gets to the core of really what everybody has an opportunity to do, and it's to use your voice to help those that have been elected to serve you better serve you. Your voice and telling them what they need to know, it helps them to write better policies. They don't know what they don't know. Some of them come to Congress and they may be a businessman, they may be a farmer, they may be a police officer. But they may not have any kind of connection to child sexual abuse. And so being able to hear from you and your voice about what exactly is going on will help to better shape how they need to approach bills that they're going to be asked to vote on. Very good. Jan?
Thank you for including me in this conversation. You can see everybody's in DC and I'm down here in Florida. And the why for me is we work with hundreds of kids every week, educating and empowering them for them to fully understand what's happening online, what online sexual exploitation is. And their experience is nobody's got our back. And pieces of legislation, because we actually cover local laws like the Safe Harbor law, and we have a sextortion law here in Florida. When we go to DC, we're actually bringing their voice with us for the legislators to fully grasp the impact of and the importance of legislation that has them have their back. Most kids have no idea that there's laws that protect them. So when I come back from DC and go, hey, these people fought for you, that also creates a really solid bond between our future voters and the process in which we the people of the United States are responsible for making sure that our legislators understand that we're the people and this is really what's important to us.
Very good. I'm going to add that I've seen how laws immediately affect what, for example, victims' path to justice. We have a suit, NCOSE has a lawsuit against Twitter, and it relies on SESTA, the Stop Exploitation, SESTA. We'll go back to that. It relies on a bill that was passed in 2018. And without that, it was an amendment to the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, which said Congress never intended to allow sex trafficking to be rampant online. So our Twitter case could not go forward without the passage of SESTA. So this legislation really creates the conditions for justice. Now,
Stop Enabling Sex Trafficking Act.
Of course, Stop Enabling Sex Trafficking Act. Thank you, Denise. So all of us have tactics, and I want to ask each of you, what tactics do you use to get a meeting? What are sort of basics in the logistics of getting meetings with legislators and their staffs? Samantha.
Yeah, so I think the first thing we need to think about is, of course, who we are emailing, right? And who we're having the meeting with. So for example, if they're general counsel, you know that this person would be in the weeds in terms of the laws. and they'll ask certain questions in terms of, I mean, I've had people asking me questions about how prosecutors would respond to particular pieces of legislation or the changes I want to make. So we really need to know who we're talking to. And honestly, in terms of getting the meeting, I mean, don't be afraid to email people. I mean, I've definitely called offices saying, hey, who do I talk to about this? You know, and don't be diffident about just emailing them, being persistent. I've definitely had people who had not emailed me back immediately, and I don't take anything to heart. You know, these people are very busy, but also it's your job to be persistent. So that's my little tidbit in how I get meetings. I'm just very persistent.
Yeah. Denise, what do you do?
I try to make a constituent request and make it in the minds when you're reaching out to a member, elected official, especially here in Washington, and you put constituent request in the email subject heading line. That's voters. That's the people that have been elected to represent. Technically, they're bosses. So when you are connecting with them, with Congress, highlight that you're a constituent, and they're going to want to hear from you because they've been elected to represent you.
Great. So true. Jan?
This is so awesome. And, you know, when we go up, because we train all over the country, I can literally speak to not every state, but pretty close. And when we set these meetings are set, it's really important that we come in respectful, much to Samantha's point, that the level of busyness is beyond anything one can even comprehend. And so it's important to be on time, to have the research and information, you know, who you're speaking to ahead of time, what's their role. It really is helpful too, I believe, and it's good to know what committees they're on, so you can speak to how that piece of legislation matches with the committee that they're on and how it's going to be important. And then my little spin, my background's marketing and advertising. So I'm always like, and this would be a great PR spin for you. Imagine the headline, Senator does XYZ. So it just plants the seed that this is a great opportunity for you to let your constituents know you're doing something for them in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And with the how, we at NCOSE, we always request with two things, a combo, subject matter experts and constituents. So the staff, and we usually meet with staffers, the staffers gonna learn information they need. So you're providing information they need through the subject matter expert, and they are connecting with constituents. Back to Denise's point, that constituent request is, they shouldn't ever turn it down, because the constituents really are those who the members are serving. Okay, so we've done how and we've done why. Now we're going to move to tips. And all of you were really, you gave tips already, but let's like highlight, you know, top tips. And Samantha, you've touched on this, but give me a little bit more on knowing who you're talking to when you make these requests or have the meetings themselves. We can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Sorry about that. Thank you. So yeah, of course. So in terms of staffer levels, there's legislative correspondents who are those who are just really getting into the legislative framework. So knowing them in a sense of they may not be as knowledgeable about the particular subject. And even you have legislative assistants who are the ones who really own that particular issue area. They may not be as knowledgeable about the subject. So I know for me, I always have to make sure to talk in layman's terms. I think we're in this area, we talk in acronyms, you know, and we say things, we may blurt things out that isn't as shocking for us because we're in it every day, but it'll definitely be shocking to the staffers just learning about the subject matter. So always assume to just know who you're talking to in the sense of how much knowledge they may have about a particular subject matter, and then work from there. There's staffers who are legislative assistants and general counsel who know so much about this subject matter that I can just go into the conversation, talk in acronyms. And there's other staffers who may not be as knowledgeable. So know who you're talking to, know who's new to this area. And also, I know one piece of advice is always give trigger warnings. I think sometimes we forget how shocking, or we know how shocking this subject matter is, but we don't always keep in mind that this may be new to other people. So know who you're talking to, know who's very familiar with the subject, and go from there.
Very good. Denise, what would you add about preparation?
Well, I think it's good to have a get together with the folks that you're going with, or if it's by yourself, just put some thoughts together about how you kind of map out potentially a meeting, an introduction and kind of a very loose agenda. But just always know that meetings can take an interesting path, whether the member is there or not, whether the staff is called away. And so the flexibility and the ability to pivot if needed, answer questions that you didn't necessarily know were going to be asked. It's okay to have some flexibility in there, and then follow up as needed. And that it gives you an additional opportunity to follow up. But the flexibility that meetings can take so many different paths, and so it's okay that they take a different path than what you originally may have thought.
Exactly. Jan.
Yeah, I want to bounce right off of that. Meetings, they might have 5 minutes. A meeting might go 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And to be able, and it's okay to say, I don't know, let me get back to you on that, because that helps with turning right around and following back up. I think the other piece too is a lot of these staffers are very young. They don't have kids. So when we talk about child trafficking or child sexual abuse, they're kind of looking at you like they're quite frankly not that many years out of the children that are being targeted. And so I always ask, do you have any younger siblings or nieces or nephews? And the moment you say that, there's that connection. They can now put that family member in that space. And it gives a little bit more wide open and freedom to have the conversation. And now they've made it personal. They can connect. It's not just some child someplace else. It's actually, what if that happened to my little sister? And as a matter of fact, we had a meeting with one of the senator's reps in Alabama, and she has a younger sister. And we had that conversation the first time we went in, and the second time we went in, we brought that right back around. So remembering who you spoke with and what they shared with you, and sharing it respectfully, and managing the pace in which you talk. It's really, if they've got 10 minutes, I would rather have 1 point and give space versus making sure I get all my 3 points in. So really speaking in a way that they can hear you and pause so you can see what you said landed.
Very good. Being respectful, building on that, on both Denise and Jan, asking them at the top of the meeting, how much time do you have to spend with us? Because you're going to calibrate differently if you've got 15 minutes or if they say they have 30 minutes. So feel free to ask that up top. Make sure that you make the connections with the state, not just that you have constituents in the meeting or on the call, but that you have just some flavor, just even if it's a headline that happened in the state the month before or the year before, that immediately makes that connection with the state. So constantly bringing it back home through an anecdote, a fact, a case, or the people you're with. Samantha.
Yeah, so another tip would be precise. I think that's you're giving great tips in a sense of know how much time you have, but in terms of being precise, I always go through the formula of state the problem and state how they can fix the problem or help fix the problem, right? So these staffers, I know they also love numbers, right? So showing like stating the problem and showing statistics to back up the problem would be great as well. But then saying, hey, this is what you can do. This is what I need you to do.
Denise, what would you add to that?
Well, and to follow up on what Samantha said, what's great about stats when you have them is that really you can use that to also help make the connection to their specific district or their state about how many kids this is impacting every single day. And they may not have known that. And if you're comparing, if there is a story in the headline and you talk about this has happened to this one child, but this is how many kids this is happening to every single day or every single month or every single year, and they can really hopefully lead to that. I can't tell you how many times I've had staff ask me, you know, do you have the stats on how many kids that this impacts every day, or do you have the cost of what this does, or do you, so they want to have that background information that really kind of builds and gives the foundation for the subject matter that you're talking about. It helps them then take it to their boss to say, it's not just somebody coming in to make this case, they also have all of the background and backup to justify it. So I think it's important to have that data when you can. You can't always have that, but it helps to build on that when you can.
Jan?
And it's a really great tool to follow up with, because if they ask you, hey, do you know how many kids this is happening to in my county? It's okay to say, I don't know. And we have access to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We have access to NCOSE. We have access to RAIN. We have access to NCA. There's a lot of people in this fight that we have access to. That you can always ask and go, hey, I was in a meeting with Senator XYZ and they asked for this. Can you provide me or something close to that? And because we're all in this fight together, pushing this thing forward, I've yet to get, no, I can't do that for you, or I can't do that, but this is what I can do. And the follow-up piece, I'm old-fashioned. I actually send handwritten thank you notes. And that has gotten me more next meetings than I care to tell you. And it's also bonded me with that person, because they appreciate the fact that we took 30 seconds out of our incredibly busy days and just wrote a thank you note, letting them know how much we appreciate them, because they're the staffers. They're rarely thanked. They're rarely appreciated at the work that they do for their senators and their representatives. So just that little note can go a long way, and it can connect you with those people in a way that has you become invaluable to them.
Very good. Don't be surprised if you don't get an answer to your follow-up. So we have a rule, and that is follow up your follow-up. And that could be calling them to make sure they got that email, or it could be going to a different staffer. All of us, I think, have experienced an indifferent staffer, and we're not confident that they have passed the message up the chain. So an approach is to either reach out in the district office, or you don't want to drop the dime too often, but I have written to legislative directors. I was on a call only last week in which the constituent, we were feeling so much coldness from a tech staffer that the constituent said, I'm going to text the senator just to make sure he knows we're meeting right now. She happened to have the cell phone of the senator. So I thought that was just a boss move, because this dude was definitely not moving our information up the chain. So now, because everyone is from, really famous organizations and doing all kinds of things, I want to hear a story from each of you on when your legislative outreach was successful or led to a breakthrough, or something you want to share about what our ultimate goals are. Starting with you again, Samantha.
Yeah, so in March, we had the SANE Act passed. So that's the Survivors Access to Nurse Exams Act. And with that particular piece of legislation, it basically authorized grants to expand access to sexual assault nurse examiners. And they are so important because they're usually the first person a survivor sees after an assault, and they are responsible for giving the survivor not only medical care, but also psychological care. And in the US, the NBC article was released, I believe, in 2019, that stated only 17 to 20% of US hospitals actually had an on-call SANE nurse. And it was unfortunate because some parts of the country, like Alaska, it actually took survivors 15 hours to see a SANE after an assault. So that particular bill, in terms of expanding access, was so important, and we were able to get it within the Violence Against Women's Act, and it passed, and now it's law. So I was so excited with that outreach. We did a lot of negotiations with legislators and also with other anti-sexual violence organizations for that particular bill. And yeah, when I saw it pass into law, I was just astounded. It was so amazing. So
congratulations on that victory.
Thank you.
Denise?
So NCA worked really closely, but helped to lead an effort to pass the VOCA Fix Act, and VOCA stands for the Victims of Crime Act. And for those that have experienced it or know anything about that, the Victims of Crime Act passed originally in 1984, but it sets up a fund from fines and penalties and fees that Department of Justice, when they prosecute cases, from the convictions, if there are fines and penalties and fees that are associated with it, that all goes into the fund. And then that money that goes into the fund is then sent out to the states, and it helps to provide services for people that have been victims of crime. I mean, that's really what it is. It's whether it's a domestic violence shelter, a rape crisis center, a children's advocacy center, if it's somebody that's been impacted by drunk driving, homicide victims. It covers everything on victims of crime. And the fund annually over the past several years has been releasing about $2.5 billion with a B dollars, but the fund was running almost down to zero. And so if you had no money, obviously that money, that $2.5 billion would cease to be able to flow to the states. And it could cause shelters to close. It could cause children's advocacy centers to close. The ripple impact would actually impact all of the criminal justice system, because you have DA's offices that have victim advocates in their offices that are paid for by VOCA dollars. So we came together to add a fix to help to continue to expand how we refill the fund. It's slowly going, but we did get it passed. It took a little bit longer than we liked, but the president signed it into law last July 22nd, 2021, and we were able to start to refill those coffers, and it truly it's starting to make a huge difference. We still have a little bit more to go, but that's one of the things that I'd like to highlight.
No, you did beautiful work. How many signers did you have to your letter of support?
Over 1,500 organizations, either national organizations and or state organizations, signed on to this letter. It covered everywhere from victim service providers, but to district attorneys, to law enforcement, to state AGs, to VOCA administrators, because it does cover the entire criminal justice system. And if that thread was pulled out, the ripple impact would be something that I don't think anybody could truly understand. And these dollars are not tax dollars. And so that's why everybody was able to truly come together to say, you've got to fix this fund, because where are you going to find $2.5 billion? There's not a $2.5 billion tree sitting around there somewhere. So we needed to pass this fix, and it's slowly refilling, and we still have a ways to go, and we're looking for other things to enhance that, but it is starting to refill.
Fantastic. Jan, what are you going to highlight?
Great. So there's a couple things. I know the request was from a lot of local agencies. So we've had success at the local level, the state level. We've also working on success at the national level. The state level, we worked for several years, and I think the key is collaboration. It's the first thing. And the second thing is to find some friends that are in your state house and state senate, and then at the federal level, at the congressional level, and senators. And what I mean by friends is people that fully understand, what you're up to and what you're wanting to create. And so we actually had two pieces of legislation passed here in the state of Florida. One was 4 years ago, one was 2 years ago. One was to require all hotel staff to be trained on human trafficking signs. So that included concierge, housekeeping, maintenance, anyone that's going to have front facing with their guests. That's huge. And then the second thing was we actually had a bill signed last year by Governor DeSantis that requires every single school K through 12 to have human trafficking prevention and awareness education, which they've rolled out across the state. I can't tell you how important that is, because we know that our kids are the target. At the national level, the Earn It Act, the Kids Online Safety Act are two super important pieces of legislation that are going to start to take on big tech. And much like with the Fix It Act, the Fix It piece, NCOSE went after people across the country. And we sent that email out to all of the people that we partnered with here in the state of Florida to have those two pieces of legislation passed. And so we sent letters as well to our senators and to our congressional representatives. And the first time we met with our representatives was literally in a hallway. It's the other thing, be prepared to meet anywhere. And it doesn't mean anything. Whether it's the cafeteria or a hallway or their office, a meeting's a meeting. And we really connected with one of the lead staffers for Representative Demings. And that made a huge difference as she signed the Earn It Act on the House side. And because we've got relationships with Senator Rubio's staffers here, between us and them, we just kept sending emails. I'm happy to say that Senator Rubio also signed the Earn It Act. And then this last trip that we were up there, we had 4 additional senators co-sponsor the Earn It Act. So persistence is everything. It takes something to have a bill passed. That's what most people don't fully get. It's not like, oh, I've got an idea and I'm going to get this thing done. It really does take something. It takes consistency, and it takes your willingness to just keep fighting the fight and gathering more people that can partner with you side by side and collaborate with you to get the message out. And I assert, if every single person that's listening to this reaches out to their mom group, to their PTA, to whomever they've got a relationship with and said, hey, let's take this on together. Let's take this particular bill on together. That would make all the difference in moving important legislation forward to keep our kids safe.
Let's end on that note, because Jan, you pretty much nailed it. And all of us will be continuing to do this work. We'd love to have you join us. All of us can be reached through our organizations. Once again, that's RAIN, National Children's Alliance, Paving the Way, and NCOSE, National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Thank you so much.